For my first sword commission that I ever did, I chose something nice and easy, a Klingon Bat'leth. This is honestly crazy complicated, and it was a little silly to attempt, but, well, I did succeed. In any case, because of the limitations of my tools and materials I have, I'm going with a forged and fabricated construction here. You can see this piece of 1084 I'm going to use to form the edge and cutting surfaces, and the rest of the blade is going to be formed with just mild steel flat bar. I'm going to start out by shaping the handle out of this piece of flat bar, which is about the right width already, because that makes up the greatest, piece, and then after that I'll do the blade edge and points. The rest of it will just be small pieces that are cut and ground to size before being welded together. The template I'm using was based off of a couple different images I found online and sort of averaged out to something I liked the best. It's not perfectly symmetrical. I did freehand some of it and the transferring of it to the board, but it is very close, actually, and I'm quite happy with the result I got from using it. Oh, not sure how much of that I got. Ran out of space on the phone again. Yep. Getting this bent around is interesting. Of course, it doesn't really want to bend in its, what would you call it, flat axis, in the plane of flatness? But it wasn't too difficult, and this actually went quite quickly.
Water all over the floor, but it really doesn't matter. Fresh treated wood, water ain't gonna hurt it. If anything, it makes the floor less flammable.
You'll see a lot of this mild steel that I have is salvage. On the end of it there's a big old chunk of angle iron that's welded on, and I'm cutting it off here in a minute just to get it out of the way so I can do the other end. There it goes.
Ta-da! I'm gonna go ahead and curve the other side to be about the same as what I've already done. Come back after that.
Okay, did that, curved the back piece, got it, I think, to a good spot. Went to sleep, next day. So both for the handle and later the blade, I do most of the work on half, and then a large portion of the other half is excluded.
Eyeballing it, holding it, I'm doing some measurements. This feels pretty close, actually. I'm quite happy with how symmetrical it is. It feels good and it looks good. Getting this specific piece of steel into the right shape, that is interesting. So, the idea here, if you can see that line, is to make a cut, which is roughly this, and pull that piece of metal out, leaving this thin strip here as the connecting part, which is this part, roughly, and then draw this out. So, she'll be interesting. Now here, I've already made my biggest mistake, and we'll talk about that more later, but the biggest portion of the work here is honestly just getting that point formed. I didn't have any steel to waste, so I wasn't going to cut the tip in or anything, and I had to just brute force work it around. Looking back now, it sure would have worked better if I'd kept that steel hotter. See,
There's always the temptation to just keep going because you want to get as much work done, because it feels like you're not getting anything done while you're heating the steel, but realistically, it heats faster if you don't let it cool down as much, and you're much better off just working at a nice, orange to yellow heat. Once it gets down to red, yeah, you can still move it, you can clean it up real nice, but put it back in. Now you see what I've done here is I've sort of done a convenience bed to move that larger tine, point, stabby bit, whatever, out of the way. And it also lets me get onto that inside corner there and start rounding it out nicely. Convenience bends, they're great. You just move the metal. It's like, oh, I can't get to what I need. You just bend it. It's fine. Now you have to be careful. Do it hot and don't bend it too much because that will weaken the steel, but duh. Getting at the little one was actually much more difficult. I've got it bent off at 90 degrees there a couple of times trying to hit it and not the big one. But it did eventually work out. Honestly, this whole process was much more straightforward than I thought it was going to be. So there, I went and did the other side as well, and I haven't really thinned the middle out at all there. I've just sort of differentiated the part of that length that I'm going to try and pull out as part of the smaller tines.
Got a ways to go. Working on one half. Got it down pretty far, but I need to pick up like another 6 inches of length at this point. So I'm going to work this one down to an even thickness and size on one half, pull it off, turn it around, do the same thing, and at that point I'm going to compare it and mark the center point so I can make sure it stays a bit more even as I go forward. Probably should have marked the center point from the beginning. Oops.
Right about at this time is when it started to feel like it was actually going to work. The two sides formed like that and starting to stretch it. I didn't really believe I had enough steel at all, or that I was going to be able to figure out how to shape those curves so that I could add steel to the back of them and have it come out looking, even half right.
Pretty even. But I still have to pick up a lot more length. Let's take a look here. A measurometer. 15 inches. And on the template, I'm guessing about the right spot. Call it 22 inches. So I've got to pick up 7 inches of length. What I wouldn't give for a power hammer. It's on the list. It's a very long list.
So I'm working only on one side, really. If you divided this down the middle, I've got the center marked, so I know how much I need to stretch each side. And the reason for that is just practical. I can't really hold on to the bloody thing. It gets too hot. So I have to keep the heat on one side, so I can keep my hand on the other.
I think that's gonna have to do for tonight. It's late and I'm tired. And my poor hands both hurt and are pruny from the water. Yeah. Next time I should finish drawing this out pretty close to where it needs to be, and at that point I'm flattening these out, getting everything shaped just right, or at least as close as I can.
As I worked it, I did consider, taking it mostly closer to like a square, only working it from the top and bottom. But I realized that I might end up overstretching it. If I did that and then tried to put in the beveled edges, I might have ended up with something too long, which really would have been frustrating. The idea here is that I'll keep the whole piece of high carbon steel contiguous so that if I want, I can etch it and have a really cool line, and any breaks in that carbon steel edge I really want to avoid. Unfortunately...
Okay. Something I was afraid of happening is starting to happen. These areas here are very thin, and since I'm using them as handles, they're taking a lot of force. I don't know how well you can see, but this one's really becoming overworked. I haven't really been hitting that area, but let me see if I can get this up to the camera. It's quite warm. Let's see here. Hopefully that'll focus. But there's quite a crack in there. I don't think it's going to focus. There we go. And that's going to keep getting worse and worse. So, I think...
Spoiler alert, those are going to end up coming off. And in retrospect, man, it would have made a lot of the forging easier if they hadn't been on to begin with. But that would have taken a lot more math and figuring than I think I could have done at the time to determine how much I needed to cut off and all of that.
See where it looks like wrinkled skin? That's those same cracks starting to form. I'm going to grind them off on this side too. They're not nearly as bad. This side was a bit thicker, and I guess it just...
And that's really what my one greatest mistake working with this was, is that cut that I did, so I could separate the two tines and pull out that shape, that should not have been the first thing that happened. It should have been close to the last thing. And if I had taken a bit more time to figure, I could have stretched the middle of the bar out first, brought the ends to a point first, and then made the cut, pulled the two pieces of steel apart. It would have put so much less stress on the two pieces. You may have noticed me holding it by the larger pointy bits, but if I had been working only at the far end, I wouldn't have needed to. I could have choked up on it, held it a little bit further forward, and not put all that stress as I was hammering on the other side, simply because the heat would have been further out, because I would have already stretched the bar. If and when I go back and do another one, that's how I'm going to approach it.
Yep, I can already see the cracks coming back. That's definitely coming off.
You can see I'm leaving the center thicker, and that's just to preserve the center point that I marked out. Once I get pretty close, I'll go ahead and squish that down to get the last bit of thickness, or length, excuse me. And we're getting pretty close to the actual width we need now. Not there yet. This whole time, over and over, I said to myself, we're almost there, we're almost there. It's like watching the clock.
It's all curvy. That's fun. Want the right shape, but is not the right shape.
Once I get it a little bit closer here, I'm going to start looking more at the actual curve.
Yep, those cracks are reforming. They're almost halfway through. Another couple heats, and that piece is just going to come flying off the end. Right. Or, right now. So that's what happens when you overwork your steel. My little tutorial for everyone.
Oh well, I kind of knew they were coming off at that point. There was really nothing I can do about it, and that timing was hilarious. I got a little upset off camera there, but then I couldn't stop laughing about it. That was amazing timing. At this point, I'm starting to try and form the little pointy bits, get them stretched out as wide as I can, leaving sort of a thicker ridge in the middle for strength. And there goes the other side.
Well, that answers that question. Huh. The other side also was overworked. It came off in my hand just now. Wow. Fascinating. Oh! It's symmetrical now. Hey! That's good, right?
The question that answered was, I wonder if and when the other big pointy bit's gonna fall off. I was thinking about it at that moment, and, well... I'm also trying to work over the point that it was attached at, so that it will be in a good shape to reattach to. Tweaking the curve as much as I can. Of course, since it is curved, as I'm working this over and then thinning it back down and then later working on the bevels, the bend kind of opens and closes, and that's just the nature of it. Nothing can really be helped about that. Kind of gotta just work it back and forth, a little bit at a time, so you don't lose control of how the steel is forming. At this point, I'm very close. I just need to pull out another maybe inch or two in width, and I need to get these closer to their final size. If I didn't mention it already, you may notice I'm not wire brushing the steel at all, and, well, that was a mistake. I figured, because I was going to be leaving it relatively thick and doing a lot of grinding, that it didn't really matter. You know, it was going to come off anyway, who cares? It didn't help that I had a very poor brush at the time, either. I didn't have one of those nice butcher block brushes, which I have now. This was a big mistake. This cost me a lot later in terms of time spent working out the scale, grinding the surfaces to try and get them clean, and the amount of material I lost. So from this point on, I'm really mostly just tweaking it. You can see I'm taking gentler blows, mostly, and really trying to refine the curve and the bevels on the edge a little bit. Sometimes it gets knocked back out of shape, but mostly just trying to bring it closer and closer to that template. You know, every heat or two, I'm checking against it, sometimes within the same heat, trying not to burn the board at the same time. While I'm finishing up here, I should say I took this project on as a commission, and it was intended to be an art piece. I had a friend of a friend who, you know, despite me pointing out that for the same price, he wanted a wall hanger, was willing to pay for a wall hanger, but wanted to see what I could do. And I said, well, you know, if you just want a Bat'leth, you can buy it right now and have it in a week or two. And it'll look great. You stick it on your wall. He says, yeah, that's fine, but I want to see what you'll do with it. All right. And I decided I wanted to make more than just a wall hanger. Which was a choice. But oh man, did I learn so much. It was definitely worth it. It's what made it worth it to me. So anyway, I said, all right, and he said, okay, and we agreed that this was going to take a while, and he was going to get something really unique out of it. I stand by that decision. That is almost certainly not perfect. It is really damn close. I think this is where I'm going to leave this for the rough forging for now. This is so close to the drawing, and as close as I can make out visually, and with the template to symmetrical, that any imperfections at this point can hopefully be ground out. It's not going to match the original template exactly, and that's okay. That was entirely built out of rough measurements I found on the internet and calculated myself, and then freehanded from there. But it looked right. And this looks just about right. With the main part of the blade done, I just have to work on the larger pointy bits now. And that really mostly just consists of thinning out that inner edge, which got very thick from how I drew out the point, and then spreading the backs out to get them as wide as they need to be. The mild steel is going to come and meet the high carbon steel about halfway along that outer arc. But the wider I can get it, the better, really. I'm going to try and keep this down to only about 4 parts if I can. Now, the forging footage that I recorded comprised maybe 3 hours solid of footage, and I've edited it down here to just over 20 minutes. I've got another, 21, 22 hours of video to get through. So, but I'm pretty sure that I can drop most of it out. There is only so much angle grinding the internet can watch, I'm sure. YouTube may want to try and prove me wrong, but I'm sure.
That's where it needs to be. The rest is going to just be grinding, I think.
And here it is, where I got to at the end of the forging. And in the next episode, I'll start fabricating new pieces and getting it all put together. Thanks for watching.